One is, I want to talk about the great Thomas Sowell, and I'm kind of kicking myself I didn't get a picture of him. Thomas Sowell is he's now at the Stanford University Hoover Institution. It is an island of conservatism in the radically left Stanford University, an island of rational conservatism at Stanford, the Hoover Institution. He's a writer there. He's a black American. As a young man, he was a leftist. He was very much a leftist, very much kind of an anti-American leftist. And he was a guy who found his way out of that crazy and into and support of the idea of America. This is what this guy did, and now he became one of the most famous economists in America. He's a prolific writer of books and all sorts of just great things. And he had an interview on the Mark Levin show. So Thomas Sowell, interviewed on the Mark Levin show, said some things that were just extremely profound, and I want to share them with you. This is a guy, he's in his 80s, and he might even be early 90s, but in his 80s at least, a guy who is, well educated. He's Dr. Sowell. He's a doctor of economics. He's an economist. He's a writer. He has exposed so much about the radical left in this country, and in a rare interview he did on the Mark Levin show, he said some things that all of us need to understand because they're really important. One is, he talked about the phrase being used so commonly, so popularly by the leftists in this country, systemic racism or systemic oppression. And he said, you hear it on college campuses. You hear it from very wealthy and fabulously famous sports stars. But what does it mean? Whatever it means, and whatever you think it means, is it really true? And he went on to say, it really has no meaning. It has no meaning that can be specified or tested in a way that one tests hypotheses. In fact, he went on to say, it reminds him of the propaganda tactics used in the Hitler era by Joseph Goebbels during the age of the Nazis. Because Goebbels was famous for saying, people will believe any lie if it's repeated long enough and loud enough. And he talked about the idea, this is one of the terms, systemic racism, that is used by the left because it sounds like it's been a complex ideological concept, must have been researched and studied and proven, and documents prove it. And it sounds like it must be a thing because the left uses it and it has a kind of intellectual name to it. He's saying there's nothing to it. There's no meaning to it. It is a term used to bully people into silence. And when he can say this, Dr. Thomas Sowell can say this on a show that maybe you don't listen to, or you didn't hear that interview, but he can say it in a way that most Americans cannot. And he actually talked about, is one of the words, this is Sowell again, talking about the use of the term systemic racism. It's one of the many words I don't even think people who use it have any clear idea what they're saying. Their purpose is served by having other people cave in. And this is what's happening in our country, this extension, this idea of being bullied by the left. You're talked about systemic racism. People go, well, if it's systemic racism, that sounds really bad. Okay, tell us what we have to do. He said, he's talking about the people using it, the leftists using this systemic racism term. They claim they want equality for all. They claim that there will be a withering away of the state. This is his idea. This is what I was talking about a moment ago, about people not liking the Blue Lives Matter slogan because they don't want the idea of police being elevated as important. So back to Sowell, he's saying, they claim, these leftists claim, there'll be the withering away of the state, the police departments, reimagine law enforcement. And yet every time you look at a Marxist state, it's authoritarian, top-down, centralized police state. He goes on to say, Thomas Sowell says, I have no idea what they mean. I'm not sure that they have any idea what they mean, in the sense that you can ask them for a factual question and get a factual answer. A brilliant observation by Thomas Sowell, and a really important thing to keep in mind in this conversation, which will happen between now and Election Day, and frankly, for now and decades to come in this country, even fancy-sounding terms, systemic racism, institutional racism, all sorts of terms that give intellectual clout or the presumption of an intellectual backing behind it, they're used by leftists, as Sowell is saying, to force people to cave in. to force people to just agree with whatever they want them to agree with. Last big important thing Sowell said in this interview is, if the conservatives lose the elections in 2020, if we actually lose the White House to Joe Biden, or whoever's really going to be president because he is mentally compromised, he's no longer able to function, he is suffering from some form of dementia. Joe Biden is unable to formulate a sentence, but someone will be running it, even if he's the figurehead standing there. But if Biden wins, and you have Democrat control of the House and Senate, as Thomas Sowell described it, we may reach the point in this country, the point of no return. We won't be able to get our country back. I want you to think about this, because people can say, oh my gosh, Sowell's being a little bit melodramatic. People, what we saw happen to this country under 8 years of President Obama, we saw how a leftist operates. Leftists fill institutions, powerful institutions in our country, powerful parts of the federal government, the FBI and the Department of Justice and the State Department and the Department of Labor and the NSA, all sorts of organizations filled by Obama with radical leftists who agree with his radical leftist Marxist ideology. This is why it has been so hard when President Trump won, and fortunately for America and the world, President Trump won, hard to uproot those people, hard to get the country righted again, hard to get America back on track. Because even if President Trump can issue executive orders, and he can get a lot done by executive orders, the entire massive administrative state in Washington that has to be moved along, that has to be brought along with his policy changes, are filled with Obama, Marxist, leftist holdovers who do not want to do the agenda, the return to America as free, America as sovereign, America as great, the America First agenda. These leftists do not want that. And so it's been very, very hard for President Trump in this first 3+ years to even begin getting, and he's done a lot. I mean, I give great credit for what he has accomplished, but I'm telling you, when leftists get power, they don't just put their policies in place for 4 years and 8 years and then wait to see what policies the American people really want to vote into place and then respect the right of the American people to choose their government. Leftists think they are supposed to substitute their judgment, their mission, their policies, their goals. They're supposed to substitute their mission for whatever agenda the American people appear to have voted for. America votes for things by choosing candidates, choosing elected officials, and saying, yes, we want this, we want America first, we want a secure border, we want to have a government that actually follows the law, we want to have strong manufacturing in America, we want jobs in America, we want to have companies coming back to America. All those kind of policy things President Trump ran on, and he is trying to put in place. But you see what happens to this country when people who simply, at the very heart of it, leftists, the anti-American left in this country, they do not believe in the idea of America, they do not believe in the values of America's founding, and they do not believe that the people of America have the right to choose their leaders and then march forward and have those leaders do the policies, put in place, implement the policies that they ran on. Leftists think, I don't care I know better than the American people. I don't care what they think. I don't care what they voted for. If leftists get their way, they will put the leftist agenda into place. They will implement it because that's what they think their goal is. They don't think their goal is to listen to the American people. It is to impose leftism on this country. And so when Thomas Sowell says, back to him, when he says that we may be at the point of no return, he's observed and commented numerous times. This Black American economist has commented numerous times about how much damage President Obama did to our country. How much damage he did by his radical leftist policies and the many, many ways he tried to weave those policies and like snakes slithering into the federal government, getting themselves rooted in. And so when a new administration comes along, you can't undo what the left was trying to do. Thomas Sowell is not engaged in hyperbole. He's not exaggerating when he says we could actually be at the point of no return if we have a Biden victory in the fall elections, because leftists will do what leftists do, which is always push their radical leftist agenda. Biden is not the milquetoast, moderate, old school throwback Democrat that he and the Democrats who are running his campaign are trying to convince America he is. Biden is first of all, he's not even there mentally, but if he were, he has been as leftist. He served as just think about this. Biden served as Obama's VP for 8 years, immersed in the Obama agenda. Never criticized it, never questioned, never said, hey, that's kind of like a socialist idea, Mr. President. I thought this is America. Never did. Went right along with Obama for 8 years. So Thomas Sowell, he is right when he says we really, really need to think about what America would turn into if in the 2020 elections we managed to have a Democrat victory by Biden. It really could be the point of no return, because leftists always try not just to stick the people into place that will perpetuate their agenda no matter how the next election comes out. If they try to put their policies in place, they try to put their assumptions in place, they push the policies that will get them to where they want to go. That's what leftists do in this country. And that's what, as one little example we talk about many times, what Obamacare was. Obamacare was intentionally written to be very, 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 very hard to repeal. It was intentionally written with just intertangled snake-like tentacles into all sorts of federal agencies and laws, many, many agencies and laws overlapping and integrated, making it virtually impossible to undo. We still may get there, but I'm telling you, this is what leftists do. This is what Biden will do. Okay, one last story I want to hit. Speaking of what leftists always do,